Okay, there's PTO shaft. Once again, this is Selecto Speed specific. Okay, so now that the rear end and the hydraulics are drained, you can remove this PTO shaft. Okay, and there's a gasket right there. Oh, looky there. That's not supposed to be like that. And that is what makes this shaft different, is those really thin splines for the Selecto Speed. Alright, so now we have our PTO shaft assembly out of the tractor. We're going to disassemble this for two reasons. One's going to be we're going to change this bearing back here and to put the seal in. You could probably change the seal without having to disassemble it. However, this is going to make it a whole lot easier. And if you need to change the little sleeve in there that your seal rides on, you're going to have to press this out anyway. So, the first thing you have to do, on this side here, there is a snap ring that needs to come out. Now this housing here is trashed, because if you remember, whenever I took this out, there was a snap ring laying here. Well, this housing is completely busted back here, where that snap ring should have locked into place. So the housing is junk, and really I should have had to kind of knock this off with a hammer or press it off, but it just fell right off. So once you remove that snap ring, just stick this into your press down on the shaft so that comes out. There's your housing with your seal. To get that seal out, you're basically just going to knock that out with a socket or a press, anything, just knock it out. And like I say, this housing's trash, so I'm really not going to put too much effort into going through the process of this. However, here in a minute I will show you how to install the new one. Right there's that sleeve. I was telling you, you can press off if it's damaged. This sleeve is available. It's usually less than $10. To get that sleeve off, you're going to press it off with this bearing. And this is the Selecto Speed shaft. I'm actually not going to be using this shaft at all, but I've already got the other one fixed, so I'm going to show you how you press this bearing off and what it's going to do when you go to do it. And that's kind of where I'm going to stop on disassembling on this shaft. But disassembly is basically just the reverse of assembly, so be sure you watch the full video for that. But pretty much stick that into your press. There is a snap ring underneath this bearing that you do not want to put your press plates on. Put your plates straight on the bearing. So now as you press this bearing off, the bearing and the sleeve will come up the splines. And there's the bearing and the sleeve off the shaft. So now we're going to transition and go to the new parts. Which, like I say, since this housing is broken, I've actually got another housing that I will be using. And of course, this being the Selecto-Speed PTO, it will not work with my 5-speed transmission. So I'll have a new shaft. So all these parts here are going into a parts pile. They may get used down the road, they may not. As you can see, I have it. My PTO housing is now painted blue. So I got some mask tape around it to help try to protect it while I press these parts into it. You're going to want your PTO seal. Just go right here. If you order this, it's usually a 9N703 is the part number. And the new ball bearing, it's number 207 or 207K, just however the manufacturer specs it. It doesn't need to be a sealed bearing because it rests in oil, so just the open ball bearing is perfectly fine. And a new sleeve if you want a sleeve. I just cleaned mine up. But first thing I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and press the seal down into this housing. And I'm just going to press it to where it's flush on this lip right here. And one thing I'm going to do, I'm going to take a little bit of RTV and put some on this outer lip. But since there's nothing on this one, and since I can kind of see daylight when I stick it up there, I'm going to be safe and just go ahead and put a small film of RTV on here. And you don't need much because most of it's going to get squashed out when you press it in anyway. Now, one thing on these seals, there's a spring on one side of it. Well, that spring needs to go towards your fluid. Okay, and I pushed it as far as I could push it, so it hit that stop. Okay, and there's our new seal installed. And as you see, you don't see any of that RTV. I mean, I've barely used any of it. Just enough to fill in any little imperfections. Now, this shaft has been sitting in my basement, so it's a little cold. Bearing's been upstairs next to my fire, so maybe it'll be a little warm. But I've got the snap ring sitting on this bearing splitter. Try to give it as much support as I can get it. And I'm basically going to have to just try and stack up as much stuff on here as I can to try to clear this shaft. That'll get me down 1/4 of an inch. Let's see how this works. And I'm basically just stacking races here, try to get off of this shaft. Now, a piece of pipe probably work as well. And one thing, when you're pressing this stuff, it generally goes pretty easily. If you're having to really force it, you need to stop and look, because something's wrong. You basically just push that bearing down to your snap ring. So now the bearing is installed. Now, this sleeve. If you look at these new sleeves, or these sleeves, this one edge has a pretty good chamfer on it. The other one's kind of a 90 that's just been rolled off. This chamfer will help you to slide it through the seal easier without tearing it. So that needs to face upwards. And we'll press this collar back on. Now you can take this collar here and even the bearing and kind of heat them up a little bit and they'll slip on, just from the heat expanding them, which is a way you can do this if you do not have access to a press. Here again, you just bring it down to your bearing and bottom it out. The way this housing is going to go on, this bearing will actually inset into the housing far enough to where we can put a snap ring on it. So I got this looped up with a little bit of silicone. Slide this out here so I can get it put on. Okay. This is basically that other housing that I did not use. That was weird. I pressed it on a certain distance and it like it just fell down. So now we have our new housing on. Well, not the new housing, the new bearing and the new seal in the housing. And I have enough room in there to get the snap ring in. Like that. You can see the end of it right there. If my camera will quit trying to focus. Right there's the end of the snap ring. So there's your new seal and new bearing in your PTO shaft. And just make sure everything spins nice and free. And there we go. And I do have a new cap that'll go on it. But that's all there is to it. And also, whenever you order your seal and kit and everything, they make a kit that comes with a new gasket that goes right here. Just go ahead and get that too. So when you put it back, you got a brand new gasket. Okay, so I'm getting ready to reinstall our PTO shaft back here. But before I install it, there's a couple things I want to do. First thing I got to do, I got to put on a new PTO gasket. And the next thing I want to do, since my tractor is completely dry at the moment, I want to put some oil on this surface right here, which is where a seal and a bushing rides. And then I want to put a little oil about right in here, because there's another seal right here. And I'm just using some New Holland 134 oil. And also, as a note, this is the coarser spline PTO to match the 5-speed instead of the Selecto speed. So we're just going to slide that in, get it through our bearing, or our bushing rather. Then we got to make sure it lines up into the PTO on the back of the transmission. So you can access that through the little PTO shifter on the side of the transmission. And just basically get everything lined up and sent home. Now we have 4 matching bolts. And they're going to get torqued to 45 foot-pounds. And then the last thing to do is just put you a cap on top of it. And that's pretty much it for installing your PTO shaft back.